So when we started this channel about a year and a few months ago, we were going to do mostly ICAC, unpacked items, things that would explain how ICAC does its thing. But the more that we have exposed this ridiculous operation, which does more to net non-predators than predators, what we found is that there were a lot of other elements to it. You know, you have third-party vendors like the people who do the psych assessments, the probation arm of the departments of corrections that have their own little weirdity involved with the attempting to break you down and build you up, which is a joke if you didn't actually have any predilection toward children. Um, we have seen how the lawyers are in on it and the judges are in on it. When I say in on it, whether they're part of some grand conspiracy or they're just trying to do quote unquote their jobs, all elements are corrupted at some level. And by corrupted, I don't mean like some nefarious evil operation, although there's certainly that too, as I'm going to explain today. But the idea that if everybody does their job and their job is a little bit off center, then the entire thing is effectively corrupted. Um, it's entirely messed up because you have people who are traffickers who are not being caught. You have children who are being trafficked that are not being saved. You have decoys, which are fake and don't exist, which are obviously not endangered. You have people who, we have laws that say that if you're 15 and 16, you can have consensual adult sex. Um, and there's a whole population that did this throughout all human history, including currently at this moment. But the laws are written such that if there's a gap of so many years, you can't do that. Again, I'm not advertising, I'm just saying this is what's on the books. Read your own state law. And yet, that is considered to be trafficking in some areas. So, at what point do you consider consent? Then you have police officers who are waiting for children to become 18 so that they can be charged with child pornography for having a 16-year-old girlfriend, which never used to be a thing either. Not to mention the great great grandparents and others who would marry when they were much younger, and that wasn't considered to be exploitation. At the same time, you have sting operations, which are not going out there and telling the truth. They're saying, well, we caught 200 and some odd people involved in child exploitation. And what you really find out, as in a recent sting in, I think, Scottsdale, Arizona, I think it was, by the ICAC equivalent called Heat out there. They like these snazzy acronyms, Arizona's hot, so heat, right? And they admit in the article that, well, there's, if you get into it, well, some were for prostitution, adult prostitution, somewhere with simple solicitation. Some did involve soliciting a minor over the age of 16. Some involved trafficking younger children. But you don't know because it doesn't break it down. The only time they ever break it down is when they're sure of their numbers, and then they want you to know how horrible and terrible it is. Most of the time, they conflate all those numbers. So if you have rape of an adult woman, which nobody obviously should do, and you're conflating that with child exploitation under sex charges, and you cleverly word it in the article, it gives a misleading impression. And I've brought out many of those many times. So, again, for people who don't want to think about this, who don't really want to, who want to believe it's very, very simple. There are bad people who want to hurt children, and that the cops are there to help them. Um, that's overly simplistic. That's the idea. Because we have police officers who are caught up in these things as well. We have the Shady Grady Judd, the notorious sheriff in Polk County, Florida, for example, Central Florida, just completed another one of his big stings. And in that, he was embarrassed to find that a sergeant in his own office, a 17-year veteran, was caught up in one of these stings. You would think that the guy would be in on those planning events or know something about it. They'd be talking about these things around the office. He would know, but apparently not. Um, you have prosecutors being caught up in it. former judges. You have an incident in West Virginia where a former police chief of some town out there was arrested someplace else. I can't quite remember where it was, and he paid $100 to a minor to have sex with him, um, which is not only child exploitation, it's prostitution. I'm sure that they'll figure out a way to make wire fraud in there or some other charge that they can make stick. At the same time, we have out in Arizona they have a new law, SB 1585, which is advancing, or I should say, a bill advancing to the legislature. And this bill would create harsher penalties for people who supposedly traffic kids. Now, listen to this latest story to show how screwed up this entire system is. And for those of you who want to believe it's very, very simple and you have it all figured out, you don't. So, somebody who incidentally stopped by my site passed on this this site that gets like 2 million views, and it's run by a former Fox News reporter. And I listened to about two-thirds of this, so I'm not gonna vouch for anything over 20 minutes 33 seconds. But the basic idea is this. He doesn't say exactly this way. He says the current administration, which would have been Biden's administration, but you could see this easily happening before that because under the Trump administration, they're willy-nilly attempt to close the border, as they said, separate a lot of families from children. And you have these children that are still not accounted for. And nobody's asking these questions. Plus, you have new children arriving at the border, being sort of pushed on there by coyotes or brought to the border. And they are being told that if you go across the border and you'll go to one of these Walmart centers, closed Walmarts are being used for this, according to this article, which I will have down below. And in these closed Walmart facilities, children are processed, they're given food, they're taken to various places, not just buses run by like the Texas Greg Abbott, there, the governor, and DeSantis, the governor of Florida. You know, a lot's been made of them sending busloads of kids and families around, and certainly they have, which is reprehensible in many ways because it's just irresponsible because they get lost in the system. And then you have these NGOs, non government organizations, contractors with the US government that are supposed to place these kids with family members, whether it be stepmothers and stepfathers, cousins, uncles, aunts, grandparents. What they're actually doing, according to this whistleblower, and again, I'm not doing anything but explaining what I have gleaned from the video. Um, they are taking these kids and bringing them to various hotels, and then they take them from those hotels to these supposed family members. They're supposed to follow a protocol to compare the ID that they have on a piece of paper with the actual ID of the person picking them up, but they're not doing that. And they're not doing DNA testing. And they have discovered in their internal memos the CEO of one of these NGO operations claiming we gave between 200 and 300 kids to people we can't verify that they have any connection to the children. And we have no follow up, really, aside from placing one phone call where they very often find that the phone numbers they've been given are disconnected or nobody answers the phone. So we have all these children that effectively, on taxpayer money, have been trafficked by the US government indirectly through these NGOs, and that they are being placed with families and they don't know anything about these families. Some of them tell horrific tales of children crying and saying they don't know who these people are, they don't want to go to these places. And some of these contractors with these NGOs are 18, 19, 20 years old. And they don't care. Apparently, according to this guy, they have been happy to give out these contractors. People have been happy to give out these children, and they want to do it quickly and get the paperwork done so that they, if they fly to a particular city around the country with these children, or they drive to that city, maybe their flight back or their departure date is a day or two later, and they get to party and their time is their own, and so they want to enjoy the city and have some fun. So they're not really all that concerned about what happens to these children. So I want you to think about that. I want you to think about how you have, you know, stings going on all over the place that are being misrepresented as to who they're really capturing. There's another one where they captured somebody who was running from the police, and we're told in the article that he was there to have sex with a child. And no doubt that's true. And I've been accused many times of somehow throwing shade for these people, and I'm not. I'm not. Anytime you're exploiting a child, I've never been for that. I've never done it, despite what some of you twits out there think who attack me on my channel. But I'm trying to expose the nature of the problem. It's much more complicated than you think it is. It isn't about somebody like me who's a veteran teacher, or somebody who was drunk and got on an adult site and wasn't paying attention to what they were doing, or some gamer on there. Don't you have any concern for these children, really, that you want to put your time and energy and resources on actually finding people who would do harm? While we're on the subject, why is it that police are effectively pimping children? They're putting people through virtue tests. Think about this for a moment. They are trying to get you interested in children, even when you say you're not. They're trying to get you interested in children so that you will follow their ruse and meet up with them. That's what they're trying to do. Now, you might say, well, good, because you're trying to hurt children, but you're not always doing that. That's not what's happening in every cases. If you're saying that you are an adult woman and you're interested in an adult relationship, and you have, 3, 4 weeks of conversation, and then the man goes to meet with you, and you say, oh, by the way, you know what? There's one more stipulation. Unless you're willing to have sex with my teenage daughter and me, there's no go. What is that about? Aren't you as a police officer deploying a decoy pimping children? Aren't you trying to encourage the very sort of behavior that you're claiming you're not interested in, that you're trying to halt in some way? What is wrong with you? So we have all of these cases that I've just highlighted around the country where we don't know, as I've said over and over again, the extent to which we have a child predation issue. We don't know how bad the situation is because you've got people who are guilty as hell, who are not never caught. You have people who are not trafficking children who are caught. You have a platform where you have gaming going on, where there's a lot of smack talk, you have adult dating or hookup platforms or fetish platforms, where there's a lot of fantasy role play going on, where there's no attempt to have sex with children. Even in the research among people who are true pedophiles, many of them have no desire to actually get together with children. Yeah, you heard that right. Read the research on it. Now, that's not to say that if the opportunity didn't, if you'll forgive me, fall into their lap, that they wouldn't take advantage of it. But knowing their illness, they are happy just simply to amuse themselves with child erotica written things and stuff. Um, Again, you may not like it, you may think it's sick, sure, but who are they hurting exactly? Maybe their own mental state, maybe we need to look into that. But that's not the same. That's my point. It's not the same as actually going out and harming a child. Whereas what the police are doing, what these NGOs are doing, what the media is doing, and yes, what some actual people who try to meet up with children for sex are doing. That's where we need to get a real handle on the problem. And unfortunately, unless we're willing to be very honest with it, it's not going to be solved. We have to really take a look at what's actually going on because it's far more complicated than people like to think. Everybody wants to reduce it to very, very simple terms because most people don't want to think, as I've said many, many times. I used to tell my students it's very important to gain critical thinking skills because most people just don't do it. But it protects you. Look at where we are in this country at the current state. We have a criminal president, for God's sake. Okay, our founders never anticipated having this sort of thing. And this is where we are. It's very important that we spend time trying to figure out what's actually going on. And instead, we spend more time planning our vacations. This is Norman Michaelation for ICAC Unpacked. Have a good day.